Welcome, everyone, to the fourth day of WESC's 25th anniversary Small Business Conference. This is presented by Connexus Credit Union. As you may know, WESC has events happening every day this week, so be sure to check out the rest of the week's events. And the link to WESC Conference will be posted in the chat box. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Connexus Credit Union and all our sponsors for their generous support this year. As a nonprofit, WESC relies on your support to put on events such as these. And I'd like to add that, Connexus really is also a champion of our cause to close the gender entrepreneurship gap through their messages with the greater community and their contributions to WESC initiatives. Today, our presentation is brand storytelling and creating an audience. This workshop will teach you how to apply the fundamentals of storytelling and their brand counterparts to your business strategy. Don't fall into the trap of posting to social media as one-way dialogue or merely broadcasting promotions. Learn how to create compelling stories that hook your audience. Thank you to Nykea Behiel from Rock and Bloom for facilitating today's presentation. Please begin when you are ready.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the intro, Jill. So I'm just going to hop on here and share my screen. Before I forget, just a few housekeeping things that I'm to share with people is that this session is being recorded and you'll get the recording tomorrow. So no worries if you have to miss a little bit or something. And then there's also a chat function and a question function. So the question is for questions, obviously, and then the chat, I'd love if you could engage ongoing throughout this, and we're going to do a little bit of work as we go through here. And the more you share, the more participation we have, I think the better this will be. So thank you all for joining me here today on a Thursday afternoon. Your energy might be waning, but we'll try to have some fun and get you to actually participate today. A huge thank you to WESC for hosting me here as well. I read on their website that in 2019, women-led businesses contributed $23 billion to the province's GDP, which is amazing. The events they're hosting this week for the virtual conference are to celebrate 25 years of work in our community. And all of that work just continues to contribute to women-led businesses, which is so important and a value close to my own heart. So today we're talking about the fundamentals of storytelling and their brand counterparts and how you can use that knowledge to create an audience that truly resonates with your brand. So it'd be great if you have a pen and paper handy. If not, you can definitely do the exercise on your computer. There's just something nostalgic or extra great about having a pen and paper. So when we do the first exercise, if you want to grab one, you'll have a minute to do that. Because you've been so generous to come spend time with me, I'm just going to introduce you and introduce myself and tell you a little bit about me. I'm Nykea Behiel. I'm the Director of Marketing at Rock and Bloom, like Jill mentioned. I'm an information junkie, so as much as I wish I loved music or was good at it, anytime I've got my headphones on, I'm listening to a podcast or a book or some sort of story. And I went to Egypt and Morocco for my honeymoon while I was 6 months pregnant. Wasn't the most popular decision with everyone in my household. And lastly, I have the cutest baby in the world. This is my son, Hart. He gets his very emphatic love of sweets from me. And who's Rock and Bloom, the agency I work at? Between your business and your customers exists your brand, and that's where we come in. We're a brand agency that creates killer brands. Creating a brand is all about listening to our clients and their audience, and we identify opportunities or problems in a business and then create a roadmap to deliver the right solution. We do everything from naming and brand identity to customer service, websites, multi-channel marketing campaigns, and more. I mentioned this offer last time I did a webinar with WESC a few weeks ago, and I'm doing it again. Our office in Riversdale has lots of room to socially distance and a really great coffee machine. So if you want to stop by, don't be shy. I like to start with a quote because usually someone else has articulated my thoughts better than me before me. This is from author Philip Pullman, who wrote the trilogy His Dark Materials. After nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the things that we need most in the world. And so why does it matter? Why are we going and talking about stories? Which would you rather drive? Go ahead and put in the chat if you'd rather drive a Porsche Cayenne or a VW Touareg. So both the Touareg and the Cayenne were initially developed in a joint partnership. They share similar architecture and engine options. They share the same base model engine. The Cayenne's is souped up a little. The Porsche has some luxury finishings, but beyond the engine, Touareg bests Cayenne in a number of categories, not to mention it's about $40,000 less. So why will people pay more for the Porsche? What about a brown egg versus a white egg? What comes to mind when you think of those? I'm just gonna try to open it. Yeah, everyone's, I like seeing everyone's answers in here. Perfect, thank you. Brown, I see a lot of brown. Yeah, because we believe them to be more sustainable, maybe more nutritious, right? But the nutritional profile is the same. They're the same thing. I think the difference actually has to do, someone said it in here, brown chickens make brown eggs. That's right. Something to do with the feather. So definitely no difference in nutritional profile. But there's a story behind that brown egg. Someone who knew that answer raises hands. Well, that makes sense. What about, would you rather drive a van or an SUV? I know my husband is trying to talk me into a van and I'm quite opposed, even though he's right. There's more space, better fuel economy, better price, better safety ratings, but still I don't want to drive a van because of the story I have on someone who drives it. And I know they're right. What about the difference between a 2-star and a 5-star resort? You're not guaranteed a better experience at a 5-star resort compared to a 2-star one. Many places don't even get star ratings, right? But still, the story is all about luxury and amenities. So to drive this in a little bit more, we're gonna do a little exercise. First, I just want you to listen. I'm gonna read a list of words. Tendon, dinner, cup, outlet, curry, officer, backyard, dress, hotel, distance. Okay, that's 10 words. I want you to take a minute and see how many of those words you can jot down on a pen and paper if you want to take a minute to get one, otherwise just on your computer on a notepad somewhere. Okay, how many did you get? I'm going to put the answers up on the screen here. So first count them. If you have them counted, how many you got, put in the chat. It's awesome. Here's the verification if you need. Okay, awesome. 4, 4, 4, 6. Perfect. Some of you have good memories. 7. Wow, I'm impressed. Okay, we're going to do this again. This time I'm going to say the word and then I'm going to read a sentence after. Okay. Explosion. She ran down to the beach after hearing a loud explosion. She hoped it wasn't what she feared. Roller coaster. Right before the roller coaster went into a tunnel, he got a glance of the one person's face who should be nowhere near this place. Letter. Folding the letter in her hands, she thought of what it would mean to actually deliver it. She was happy not to be on the receiving end of this news. Pig. The pig was covered in oil and the little kids chased it around the pen trying to be the hero who caught the greasy pig. Taco. Smelling the ocean and feeling the breeze, this was definitely the best taco he'd ever had. House. The day this house became a home was the day the couple brought home Rudy, their mischievous golden retriever. Batteries. He sprinted to the store and hoped it would be open at this hour. Without replacing the batteries, there was no way to make the incessant beeping stop. Peppercorn. Though her cooking wasn't horrible, there had been many times when he'd bitten into an undercooked peppercorn, nearly shattering his teeth. Chalk. The chalk outline on the ground seemed ghostly and foreboding. Brain. Her brain didn't work the way others did. She wished it would, so things wouldn't be so painful. She might have the chance to forget. Okay, go ahead and see how many of those you can write down this time. When you've done it, feel free to share in the chat. And I'm going to put the answers up for you to verify here. Coming up. How many of you got more the second time around? 7, 7, 6. Less the second time, but okay, more. 5, still 7. Okay, so if you're like most people, you'll probably remember more words on the second time. I wrote them down as you were talking. Well, I guess you'll definitely get more that way. That's because the words didn't have to stand alone. They're accompanied by a short story. Stories engage our emotions and they make things more memorable. Research shows that messages delivered as stories can be up to 22 times more memorable than just facts. And I've seen other stats like 63% of people recalled a story from a presentation, but only 5% recalled a stat, which means you'll probably forget that. There's lots of data and it's no surprise because our brains function in stories. If there is no story, we make one up. So our ideal as a brand is to create the right stories to be repeated by us, our employees, and then our customers. Brooke said peppercorn is a great word. And that's actually another point, is the more descriptive your language is. So if you think of shattering teeth or something more vivid that you can feel, that's also going to be more likely to be remembered. So today we're going to talk about the fundamentals of story and then apply them to our brands, finding the brand counterparts to these characteristics. So the fundamentals of story are setting, characters, plot, conflict, theme, and story arc. That's probably not new to most of you. So setting, the setting of a story. That all it is the time and location in which your story takes place. Settings can be really specific, but they can be more broad and descriptive as well. Like they can be as specific as Hogwarts, School of Witchcraft and Wizardry from 1991 to 1998. That's really specific. Or they can be a bit more broad and nondescript, like a tired cabin in the woods, nondescript time. Our market equivalent, our brand equivalent is market. So that's just the place where you're conducting business. You can't be everything to everyone. So your field might be broad, but what's your niche? If you're a photographer, are you into wedding photography or newborn or food? What's your niche? So market could be broad, again, like the last example in setting, engage women looking for wedding photography, or it can be more specific. This is better, ideally, is stay-at-home moms between the ages of 26 and 45 that live within 20 miles of Saskatoon with a medium household income of greater than $150,000 a year. That's really specific. That's a tight way to round out our market. So we're going to do the same here. We're going to define your market. So I think a market is the top of the funnel, the most broad way to describe your target demographic. So I'm going to give you each a few minutes to describe your target market. This should encompass your audience's age, location, gender, and spending power. That's it, just those 4 things. Once you jot all those down, write it in a sentence. For example, the last one that was on the screen, stay-at-home moms between the ages of 26 to 45 that live within 20 miles of Saskatoon with the median household income of greater than $150,000 a year. Let's try that. So I'll leave this on the screen while you write your own. If you don't have a pen and paper, this is a good time to grab it. And Josie's going to throw up a poll question. It's how well do you know your audience? So before you fill this out, give us a guess. How well do you know your audience where 1 is not as good and 10's the best? How well do you think you know your target demographic? You have about 30 seconds to fill that one in. And then I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to write your market statement. I'd love if you shared it in the chat. It looks like this group is engaging in here, which is really awesome. It makes it easier for me so I don't feel like I'm talking to a wall or just a computer. Okay, Josie shared the results with me. So it looks like most of you think you know your audience pretty well, which is awesome. No one chose 100%. No one chose really, really well. Very few of you chose 9. Most of you are in 5, 6, 7 category. So that's good. We're going to try to define it even more. So I'm just setting a timer right now. You have 2 minutes to define your target market. I'd love it if you'd share it in the chat after. Awesome, someone's sharing here. Working professional moms, 32 to 55, living in Canada with a median household income of greater than 100,000 a year with an interest in improving their lifestyle. That's a really good one. If your product blurs the line of gender, you can definitely, that's a great question, Megan. You can definitely include both. You might just not specify in that case. So normally you would specify, but I know your product and you're right, I wouldn't specify. Awesome. Age 30 to 55, location, global, gender, typically male, spending power, 50,000 plus. Young women and men between the ages of 8 and 30 who earn about 90 to 120 who want training in boxing or fencing. Awesome. These are great. Okay, you have about 20 more seconds to get your own down. 20-plus-year-old men and women in Canada and US with a median income greater than 100,000 looking for a wilderness fishing vacation. Very cool. I'm interested in what you all do. These are great. Okay, take the next few seconds to wrap yours up, and then we're going to move on to the next bit here. That's 2 minutes. Awesome. You can still share them in the chat. Otherwise, try to share the next thing if you can.
Okay, you do have a question in the Q&A box as well, if you want to take a look at that at a time that works for you.
Good eye. Do you use the same type of categories for target market for B2B? Great question, Veronique. I do, and this can get more specific. B2B will sometimes have additional categories, but if you have another, a specific question within that, we can go in, but the answer is kind of, it depends, but I would say yes, generally. Great question. Okay, so we're gonna go deeper than market and dive into audiences. So this is the next part of that funnel. Whose opinion do you care the most about? And when you answer that, you might realize that your brand matters not just to customers, but also other businesses or employees, reporters, maybe even politicians. So you can use broad categories like athletes or segments like runners. So a runner is a segment within the category of athletes. So it's up to you. I say be as specific as you can. If your shoes are made for runners specifically, say runners, not athletes. They have a different language than basketball players, than tennis players, than hockey players, than any other sport. And the more you can speak their language, the more likely you can actually solve their problems and understand their challenges. The more likely you are to identify with them. The idea is to create messaging that truly resonates with your audience. So those of you who tuned in a couple weeks ago to our brand voice presentation, some of this is going to look familiar. If you were this slide in particular, this is an exercise that we generally do in a brand sprint at Rock and Bloom. We identify our top 3 audiences. For WestJet, as an example, it's business travelers, and even more specifically, young professionals. Vacation goers is the category, and then more specifically, the segment of families and couples. And then their last audience is their employees. And this is who all their marketing messaging is speaking to. And the next time you watch a WestJet ad or see a WestJet tweet, try to think of that and see if they're speaking to the right persona. So let's do yours as well. I want you to identify your top 3 audiences. Who's your company targeting? So your market statement that we just wrote will probably play into this. And in fact, these 3 audiences might all be inside of that, or you might identify 1 or 2 outside of your market. One example of that would be, like for WestJet, your own employees. So I'm going to set a timer again for 2 minutes. And if you're comfortable sharing, I'd love that. Otherwise, just jot them down privately. You have about 1 minute left. Awesome. Marian's putting hers in here. Families, blue collar, construction specifically, school and work lunches. Awesome. Fishermen, fisherwomen, and wilderness vacation seekers. Awesome. Blog solopreneurs on specific topics, big media sites that cover multiple topics, marketing agencies on teaching digital marketing. Awesome. I love seeing these. Okay, another good question coming in here on the Q&A. I'm starting a natural healing business, positive or negative, to include pets in the audience, or should this be a different website? That's a good question. I'd say your audience are the decision makers. So your audience isn't the pet, but it would be the owner. Does that make sense, Linda? Let me know if that answered you, but I would think target a pet owner, not the actual pet. That's actually a mistake I think I see a lot in branding that speaks to children, is that usually they're not the ones making the decision, say like a children's hospital or something. We'd want to target the parents. And that's kind of a similar thing. Okay, so wrap up your audiences. Awesome. Thanks to all of you for sharing. I'm just going to read one more. Expecting and new parents, other birth professionals, small businesses in the field, general public, those wanting to support their new parents in their new lives. Awesome. Okay, thanks for sharing, everyone. Next, you can't have a story without characters. How many of you watched The Last Dance? That was just, I finished it recently and I'm still somewhat obsessed with it. So what you remember about a story almost always has to do with a character. You can't have Anne of Green Gables without Anne, or The Last Dance without Michael Jordan. Think of your favorite movies or shows and think of what comes to mind. Often it's the characters. We come to care about them and we get invested emotionally in a show or a movie or a book. And that's what we want people to do with our brands. We want them to become emotionally invested. So we need to define characters for your brand to give people that opportunity. So we're going to define characters using customer personas. That's our brand storytelling equivalent. I'm a big advocate of personas because they help you stay focused on your customers' problems rather than your solutions. There's an old adage in advertising that you want to convince 10% of the people 100% of the way rather than 100% of the people 10% of the way. Because if you're speaking to everyone, you're really not speaking to anyone. Your message is diluted and it's boring. So you need to identify the needs of your customers and then stay centered on those needs. Building personas really helps you make marketing or strategy or business or really any decisions that affect your business more effectively. Because whenever you have a decision to make, you could run it through the persona qualifier. Should we sponsor this trade show? Well, will so-and-so be there? Should we advertise on Instagram? Should we even have an Instagram channel? Well, is our customer persona there? So everyone we can ask, and this will clarify our decision. This picture is a little graphic, but we need to think of our customers and put ourselves in their shoes. So we need to play a little role reversal. To create worthwhile personas, you need a few things. You need research, vision, and imagination. Because a client coming to you, it's a statement about them, not just you. I buy Apple products because I think of myself as the creative type who needs a MacBook. I think Mac has less problems and is more user-friendly. I believe that they're a better product. I. It's all about me. It's not as much about Apple, though they've helped shape that narrative with their brand storytelling. So it's a statement about me. Your stories, they need to be about somebody. Obviously, they can be about you or your clients. It's often more effective to tell a compelling story about the people you help, so your clients, rather than yourself. A few of the podcasts I listen to, they're doing a really good job of this with their ads. Because ads are annoying. They keep you from the core content and they're an interruption. But when it's particularly relevant to an audience, it can be interesting content too. Like I listen to Dax Shepard on Armchair Expert pretty regularly, and I notice that their ads talk almost exclusively about the customer and not the product. So when Wix is advertising, they'll tell you all about a business, how they succeeded, they were building a website, and it's only a footnote that the website happens to be built on Wix. The business is the protagonist. They overcame the challenge, which was selling products through COVID in this case, and the solution to their problem was Wix. So before you can do that, you need to know your customers. What are their problems? So 55% of people would consider buying a brand in the future if they really love a story. And 66% of people believe the best stories are those about regular people, i.e. about themselves. One ideal format is to frame your customer as a protagonist. That's generally the easiest way to do it. Make them the heart of your story. Here's an example of a persona we built for a client. Meet hipster Hallie. She's young and tragically hip. She lives and works in Riversdale and is an advocate for the neighborhood. So we dive into demographic info, just like your market example. Hallie is 29, single, makes about $70,000 a year. And then we go further. What's her personality like? What are her interests? She's a type 4 on the Enneagram, which is a personality profile. Anyone interested in the Enneagram? She's sensitive, she's expressive, dramatic, self-absorbed, and Hallie knows she has a lot to offer, and she's convinced her creativity is better than her coworkers. She's an intense foodie, and she prides herself on trying new restaurants right after they open, and when she tries it, you know she's got an opinion. Some of her hobbies are traveling, design, yoga, painting, environmentalism, and trying new activities. Then we think even deeper about her values. What really matters to Hallie? She's environmentally conscious and values creativity and good design. So always when you're coming up with these, think, how will this affect my brand? What will this mean for a brand trying to target her? That having a sustainable business practice is important and you should make that known. Hallie will also be drawn to nice visuals and good branding, something else we need to take into consideration if we're targeting her. And we want to know about her job. Then what other brands resonate with her, because we might dig into some of those brands and see how they talk to their customers and if it's applicable to us. Then we need to know her routines and online behaviors. In a lot of ways, this is where we can find Hallie and how we can advertise to her. So where will she see our content? Instagram's a good bet. Maybe we want to start publishing on Medium or try to get some links in other places. And we really want to know Hallie's goals and challenges. These are really important because what we want to do as a brand is solve problems for our customers. That's really why we exist. That's why your company is still in the world. And we can solve Hallie's problems for her. If we can, she's going to come back to us time and again. So think of your customers' challenges broadly, then think of them how they pertain to your brand. If you're a snack food company, you'll want to know Hallie's challenges in eating healthy or in feeling satisfied. Think about also deterrence from your brand. What might push someone away from you? We want to get out ahead of negative perceptions and make people think of you favorably. And I like to include quotes. This is best when they're real quotes, which you can get from doing a customer survey or some other feedback loop. Looking at all that info, I always include a marketing messages and motivation section. So really all of this whole persona is about speaking to the right person and highlighting the right messaging. So it helps to narrow in on the specific parts of your offering that will really resonate with the customer. How many of you know a Hallie? The idea with a persona is to paint a vivid portrait of a real customer, of what a real customer could be, or of just something we can picture. Here's another example of a persona. This one is done by a shoe store, so they zoned in on Brandy's difficulty to find shoes that properly fit. I like the real customer quotes they have at the bottom. Here's another example, and this one is built for a coffee shop. What I like about this one is the inclusion of a day in the life. I'll often include that in my personas. What does their average day look like? They get up, do they do yoga? Are they trying to get kids to school? Whatever their day looks like. This can help you pinpoint when a customer might actually need you. And I also like the what influences her section and what makes her life easier category. Ideally, our brand will fit into the what makes her life easier category. That's our goal. So with customer personas, when you're getting started, it can feel overwhelming. There are a lot of ways you can start. This process is iterative and adaptive. You can adjust them as you verify your personas, and you might even create a negative persona. Be like, every time we get this kind of person, they churn, or they're bad for our brand, or they take up too much of our mind share. Anything like that, we might create someone who we don't want to target. To begin, I often look at your website or your social analytics and see that audience as a microcosm of your full target market. When possible, I'll do a survey and gather data from current or previous customers. And I always supplement that with general market research. What's going on in Saskatoon or whatever your market is. And what we said earlier is that personas take a healthy amount of research, vision, and imagination. So we're going to start with imagination today by brainstorming your idea. We have another question. First a poll we'll put up, and then I'll answer this question. We have a poll. How many of you have customer personas at your business already? I'm curious to that. Josie, if you don't mind popping that up. And we've got a question. I'll actually pull this up first. So you're going to do a draft customer persona. Don't worry about perfection, because this is something that can take a long time to create. We're going to do more research and back it with some stats, but we're going to do it with your ideal. This is the bottom part of our target demographic. There, the poll's up now. Thanks, Josie. We started at the top with our market, then moved to audiences, segments, and now finally personas. So use all the intuition and the data that you have in your head. I bet you know more about your audience than you would have thought. Think of customers that you know, the ones you speak with when you're in store, if you have a physical location. And if your business is brand new, then think of who you're creating this for. Why are you opening this business? So I'm going to give you 5 to 7 minutes or so here to jot down a persona. So try to write something in each of these fields. And you're welcome to include additional fields if you're inspired. Okay, most of you don't have a customer persona. Just 63% of you don't, but 35% you do, which is awesome. So great. If you're in the position where you already have one, see if you can reiterate, see how much you know about them. Can you regurgitate it even? Awesome. I'm going to leave this on the screen and give you 5 minutes here. I'm going to just time it. And we've got a question. Valerie asked, I'm in the service of hypnotherapy, and any age, gender, and worldwide works since I can do it online. A category would be the only thing the first question applies to: trauma, anxiety. Okay, good question, Val, or Valerie. Even though your service can go to anyone, think of who you really want. And this is often really challenging to people who have a service that can apply broadly, but think of who is your best customer. Someone who can pay up front, someone who's going to commit to long term, someone who wants to change themselves. because you still, even though your service can apply to everyone, your messaging won't resonate if you're not speaking to someone. So try to zone in. You might have multiple personas, but try to create personas still. That makes sense. Good question from Megan. For B2B, do you have suggestions on centering personas around business types or people within the companies that you interact with? I think if I'm reading this right, kind of are targeting a business or a person. I would always say identify a person, a persona. So who you will be dealing with at that business, whether that's director of people operations or someone in HR or marketing, your CMO. I'd pick a person and give them a title at that business. Okay, you have about 2 more minutes. Okay, try wrapping up your personas. I know that's not nearly enough time, but we have a lot of material to go through and I want to make sure we cover enough stuff, and you'll probably have to come back to dig into this stuff anyway. It would be a miracle if you could get it done in even 12 minutes. If anyone has any parts that they came across that they want to share, feel free to put that in the chat. I always love to see it. Otherwise, we're going to keep going here. The next part of the story of storytelling is the plot. Every story has a plot, of course. There'd be no drama or no hook if everything was all character development. And the plot is simply just the sequence of events that connect the audience to the protagonist and their ultimate goal. A logline is a screenplay summary in 1 or 2 sentences. It's hard, but it's often all that writers or producers get to pitch a script. A good logline sums up the entire plot in just a few words. The objective of a logline is to whet someone's appetite. You're just trying to bait them with the mystery. What happens? How does it happen? And you want to sell, not tell. If you tell them too much, they won't have any questions and then no reason to read your script. Can you guess the films of these loglines? If you know them, write them in the chat. The aging patriarch of an organized crime dynasty transfers control of his clandestine empire to his reluctant son. Or what about this one? Main character, while not intelligent, has accidentally been present at many historic moments, but his true love, Jenny Curran, eludes him. Good job, Jesse, you got it. So the first one is and Tamara, you got The Godfather before we put it on. Good job. So The Godfather and Forrest Gump. It's obviously very hard to condense a movie into 1 sentence. A logline must always have the protagonist, their goal, and the antagonist or the antagonist force, whatever they're working against. This is really good practice to apply to all of your copy. Thinking of even a social media post. Can you get a story in just the description there? So try to write a logline for your business. Think of it like an elevator pitch. So if someone asks you what your company does, what do you say? And is it the same every time? If you had just 10 seconds in an elevator with a potential investor, could you get your company funding? Write your log lines, and then when you're done, put in the chat if you're comfortable. And don't worry, these are all a work in progress, so no pressure on perfection. I'm gonna give you 2 minutes here. And I see there's another question. Set my timer. Carissa asks, as a massage therapist, I tend to have a few types of clients. Would I create a persona to target each of those types so long as I want to attract more, and then create post marketing for each? I tend to market mostly through social media, so can rotate ads posts if that's not spreading things too thin. Great question. Yes, you can have multiple personas. Limit it as much as you can. I'd say 3 is sort of your max. And then each of your posts or each of your blogs should speak to at least one of those. Sometimes multiple, but at least one. And then as you're creating them, if you're starting to get 5 or 6 personas, that's too many, see what the difference is. Is it different how I talk to these people? And if so, they are separate personas, but if not, if it doesn't really make an effective difference in how you market, then condense them. Hope that answers you. That's a great one. I create and market pottery that makes people smile. Love that. Locally grown, non-GMO tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers produced without pesticides. Awesome. Sustainable and natural surface water and wastewater, remediation tailored to your unique situation. Very cool. How do you speak differently to each persona? A good question. It just depends how different they are. So if your persona is a millennial, you're going to want to speak a little bit more casually using that sort of vernacular. If your persona is someone heavy into the tech industry, then maybe it's okay for you to use a bit of jargon. Different platforms is another one. Some people are on Facebook, some people are on Instagram, some people are on neither, and you're going to need to attempt to find them through Google. That's a great question. I just jumped. Whoever asked that was a good question. Veronique says, I help organizations communicate better through effective strategies and plans, impactful writing and editing, as well as accurate and culturally sensitive English-French translation. Awesome, beautifully written. And Tamara, our personal training specialist and professional chef, provides online resources and guidance for improving women's lifestyles through an interactive app. These are great. You guys are doing a good job of including all that needs to be in a logline. This might even be something that you rework and you use in your social media profiles for an about or your Twitter bio or something like that. Awesome. Okay, I gave you more than 2 minutes there, so wrap yours up if you're not quite done. And we're going to go on to the next one. Our plot, your brand's plot, is your customer's journey accompanied by your marketing strategy. So your marketing strategy is just documenting how you will move customers through your sales funnel. How will you achieve your goals? What tactics, mediums, and channels will you use? And then thinking of your customer journey, I don't know how many of you have documented this before. I'd love to see it in the chat. I didn't make this a poll, but I could have. Just note in the chat if you've walked through your customer's journey. It's really just exactly what it sounds like. It's the path a customer takes to buy something from you. We map this out thoroughly with many of our clients, and it's often an enlightening process. We try to identify every touch point you have with your customers, all the way from awareness through to advocacy. And documenting this can be overwhelming because brands can have dozens and dozens and dozens of touch points. This could include like your website, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, phone, client referral, online booking system, billboard, digital ads, content marketing, email marketing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So write down all the touch points your brand has with your customers and find out if there are any broken links in your brand chain. Does Jason answer the phone with the same messaging that the agency you hired to do your ad writes in? Ideally, each and every one of these will exude your brand, and customers would know what their company what company they were talking to, even if your logo wasn't there. And then after identifying all your brand touch points along your customer journey, you need to create a marketing strategy that helps meet your customers wherever they are. Where are they getting lost in your funnel? Or where is there an opportunity for improvement? How can you help them? And to write a comprehensive marketing strategy and understand if your journey is fractured, your customer journey, you need to know your North Star. What is the single measurable thing that is most important to your company? So your North Star should provide a lens for measuring sustainable growth, and it should correlate to value delivered to customers. So your North Star couldn't or should not be just a number. If you hit a sales number, that has no impact on your customers. Your North Star should be something that provides value to your brand and your customers simultaneously. So for example, Airbnb, their North Star is number of nights booked. Obviously, that provides value to them. They make money every time someone books a night on their platform, but it also provides value to their customers because they're experiencing Airbnb's benefit. They are having a problem solved. For Facebook, that's their North Star is daily active users. Obviously, they get a benefit by having you log on. They have more people that they can target with their ads and profit from. And you, they're assuming, are getting some value from using the platform. Uber is number of active drivers. Excuse me. Your marketing strategy should mesh with your North Star, and it should be a series of tactics and a blueprint to really just push that vision forward. Your North Star usually falls into the lagging indicators pile. So leading indicators are something you can control. These metrics are easy to influence, but really difficult to define. An example might be the number of times you post on social media or the number of emails you send. You can directly affect these metrics. Lagging indicators are the opposite. They're the ones that we really want to achieve, but we have very little control over them. They're easy to measure, but really difficult to influence. So an example of that might be social engagement or email open rates. We can't control how someone's going to receive our content, though ultimately that's what we care the most about. Uber can't really control the number of their active drivers, but they can control their marketing spend, the emails prospective drivers get, and so on. They just can't actually force someone to sign up as a driver. So think of leading indicator as the steps and activities you engage in, monitored by a Fitbit, and the lagging indicator is your weight on the scale. So you might actually really want to affect the weight on the scale, but all you can do is count your steps and count your calories. Of course, you're going to have to come up with your North Star. So think of what means most to your brand. How will you know you've been successful at the end of a business year, at the end of a quarter? What number do you want to move? If there was one number you could measure and just one, what would it be? Remember that it needs to be something that provides value to your customers and your brand. So I'll give you a couple minutes to jot down your North Star, and if you're comfortable, share it in this chat section when you're done. Ideally, include your industry. That'll give us a little bit of context. I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes here. Great question. So Janine asked, what would a North Star look like for a service organization? Really good question. That could be the number of people you help, because that would be a benefit to your brand as well as to the people who are getting help. Trying to think, it depends on what the service is, but like so at our agency, we offer services, and something might be revenue per project because they're getting better value of the project. People are coming to us and they're getting bigger and better results and more value, and we are obviously getting more value. Hope that gives you an idea. Awesome. Great. And Heather says, what would a North Star look like for a product-based business? Good question. So let me try to think of an example, but that might be as simple as number of products sold, or number of products sold per something, number, or the value. Like a restaurant, it might be the value of a check. We want that to go up. We want people to order more than just pizza. We want to add wine to their list. Both of us are getting value. Whereas a restaurant making more profit, and the customer is seeing a benefit because they're experiencing more of our brand. Hope that answers you. Awesome. People are putting things in here. Number of businesses subscribed, clients treated per month, good one. Number of new clients, another good one. And this is something that will probably stick with you for a while, but you might transition. So number of new clients, eventually, if you have too many clients, at one point it might be retention of some sort. Number of translations done, number of pieces written. Awesome. Awesome. Number of email subscribers, that's another good one. Awesome. Okay. That's been a couple minutes, so I'm just going to give you a few seconds to wrap yours up if you haven't done so. And now we're going to move on again. I think we're actually pretty much right on time, which isn't always the case with me. No story is complete without conflict. This is rock, paper, scissors illustration. I thought it was cute. There are 6 types of literary conflict, and what you choose to pit your characters against has significant effect on the stories you tell, because conflict is what drives the story. It creates tension, builds suspense. If there's no conflict, no one will care, because there's no story. We don't want to listen to a story that's all character building. So there are 6 types of literary conflict. They are person against person. So an example of that would be the Hunger Games. Person against nature, like we see in Jaws. Person against self, A Beautiful Mind. Person against society, The Handmaid's Tale. Person against the supernatural, The War of the Worlds. And person against technology, which is The Matrix. So our storytelling parallel to conflict is the problems you solve, the ones you solve for your customer. So what problem are you solving? This is related to your why, and likely one of the key reasons your company started. If you're a little further removed from that right now, think of what you're trying to get your customers to do, and that will bring you closer. What is your aim for them? So like for instance, Google. I don't know how many of you were on the internet before Google, but it was a mess. They solved the problem of bad, irrelevant search results. Before Tinder, meeting people generally only happened on weekends, not 7 days a week. And Nike sets out to solve the problem of ill-fitting shoes. So all of these are pretty broad, ambitious goals, something that would be pretty hard to achieve. But that's generally what goes here, the problem you solve. So now it's your turn. Think of a problem that your brand solves for customers. What does it all boil down to? So I'm going to give you, again, about 3 minutes here. And I'd love if you typed it in the chat, of course. just under a minute to go. Awesome. I'm seeing some really good answers in here. Meaningful ceremonies in a secular world, a clean, reliable, stress-free fishing vacation location for everyone, moment to themselves. Awesome. Indigenous peoples' participation in the economy. Awesome. There is a lot of great content here. If you can think of it, framing it in as an answer, like it's Jeopardy. Heightened connectivity and ease of sourcing in the tourism industry. Awesome. Thank you all for participating so well. Makes it a whole lot easier for me. Less intimidating. Okay, have a few more seconds, wrap up yours, and then we're gonna keep going. Better skin to live in. Awesome. Okay, we're gonna go on to the next thing. And then there's theme. The theme of a story is what the author is trying to convey, the central idea of the whole story. So short stories often have just one theme, whereas a novel or a movie might have multiple themes. The theme of a story is woven all the way through the entire story, the characters' actions, their motivations, all of that reflects the story's theme. So the story is really just the tip of the iceberg. The theme is what's filling it all and coming up from underneath. Thanks, Lorianne. Love the iceberg. It took me a while to find this picture. So the theme is what the story is really about. It's the main idea or the underlying meaning. One of the main themes in Titanic, for instance, is perseverance. So you can think of Jack persevering Rose and vice versa, or pursuing, sorry, trying to stay alive, trying to get on a lifeboat. They're always trying to persevere. Our brand parallel, what we're going to call our brand parallel to theme, is USP, which is our unique selling proposition. And the minor theme of that, our brand archetype. So the main focus of theme of USP is differentiation. Hathaway, some of you might know this story, was a small shirt company in the 50s. They've been around for more than 100 years, and they existed that whole time as a small company. Eventually, they scraped together enough gall and budget to get David Ogilvy to do a campaign for them, and he was a big deal then, even now, more now so. He's known as the father of advertising. I can't remember, but I think the guy who was heading up Hathaway had to promise he'd never change a word of copy and that he'd remain a customer for life if Ogilvy took him on for their meager budget. And they did. So white shirts were popular for men at the time. That's pretty much all everyone wore. So because of that, though, there was no meaningful way to distinguish a Hathaway shirt from every other shirt on the market. So Ogilvy added one extra detail to an ordinary photo shoot in an attempt to change that. On the way to the photo shoot, he stopped at the dime store to purchase a couple 5-cent costume eye patches. And so a few minutes into the shoot, he tossed an eye patch to the model, who wore it for the rest of the shoot. And it looks tacky now, but it made quite a splash in the 50s. And when the campaign launched, the Hathaway man was given a rich, exotic backstory, and he became the man in the Hathaway shirt, and he became hugely successful for the company and was featured in dozens of ads well into the 80s. So a 30-year campaign is amazing for anyone to achieve. Hathaway grew to become the second largest shirt maker in the US from a small company. Not to say it's all due to this ad, but due to differentiating themselves and setting themselves aside. Cassius Clay, who later became Muhammad Ali, he met Gorgeous George at a radio station in the 60s. They were both there doing self-promotion for upcoming fights, and Clay was in awe of George. George was like really promoting himself. He went on and on and on about how he was the best and so gorgeous, and that his opponents were the worst and bound to fail. And Clay went and watched the fight. He had to see it. He was so drawn in after he heard George talking. And really, though, the fight was a footnote. The spectacle was that George created was the true show, was like getting the crowd involved, riling up, yelling at his opponent. They spoke after the show because I think George recognized that Clay was someone who would be up and coming in the industry. And he told him the key was to get the crowd to react. Whether they love you or hate you wasn't important. The important thing was to be outrageous. And Clay took that advice to heart and became the Muhammad Ali we all remember today. The whole point is to be different, to stand out. Even if you weren't a fan of Gorgeous George, or you thought he was ridiculous or flamboyant, or even if you hated him, you were surely not going to forget him. He sold tickets, and that's what we need to do with our brands too. So brands differentiate themselves by having a solid, well-known, unique selling proposition, or a USP. And that's the one thing that makes your business better than the competition, better than everyone else in the market. It's a specific benefit that makes you stand out. So like the founder of Revlon, he said he sold hope, not makeup. Some airlines sell friendly service, others sell cheap flights. Neiman Marcus luxury, Walmart bargains. There's no right answer. It's just having a position is important. Does anyone know Avis's USP? Go ahead, type it in the chat if you're faster than my fingers here. We're number 2. We try harder. What about Death Wish Coffee? World's strongest coffee. You might have guessed from their brand and logo. M&M's. This one I bet lots of you know. Melt in your mouth, not in your hands. Tom's. We give a new pair of shoes to a child in need for every pair you purchase. This was pretty revolutionary at the time, even still is now. And Domino's. Just because they couldn't say we're the worst pizza, said you get fresh, hot pizza delivered to your door in 30 minutes or less, or it's free. Carla has a question. Is the USP the same as a tagline? Good question. It can be. It often isn't. So your USP might be your why statement. It might be heavily featured on your website or in other places where the content is. So it could be your tagline, but not necessarily. Good question. So we want to put yourself in your customer's shoes. Step back from your day-to-day operations, because it's easy when we're all in our bubble to think only of what other people around us want to hear. And we're too involved in the brand. So we need to take a step back to scrutinize what our customers really want. We want to know what motivates their buying decisions. Uncover the real reasons they buy our product instead of someone else's. And I always like, I've mentioned this a couple times, but I always like a survey. Clear your mind of any preconceived ideas about your product and just be honest. Take what people say into consideration. I know Domino's did that. I don't think it was a survey, but they were listening to customers and people kept saying, this pizza is bad. And they listened and they weren't embarrassed when they said, hey, we reworked the recipe and now it's better. We heard you. And they even showed some of the bad reviews. So really listen to your customers, and this can help you identify this, though some of you will know this already. Of course, we're going to get you to try to do it. So what do you offer that's different than your competitors? I'm going to give you 3 or so minutes here. I'd love to see yours in the chat. Ideally, this is short. 2 sentences would be stretching it. 1 is ideal. Like all those other ones we looked at, the longest one I think was melt in your mouth, not in your hand. So see if you can condense why you're different in just a few words. Okay, I'm going to set the timer here for a couple. I'm going to unmute to read a few of these. They're really good ones. Not your average sport training, memorable treasures in clay, small town Saskatchewan service, world-class recreation products. Your business is part of the community. Your accountant should be too. Very cool. Thematically display your data, allowing you to change the look from month to month. We clean with grit. Why do it alone when together is better? Awesome. Some of these are really great. Better skin to live in without surgery. Awesome. A grooming experience that's healthy for a man's soul. I love these. Connection built on understanding. Hey, all of you have had really great creative answers. This is awesome. Targeting your pain leaves you relaxed. Custom ceremonies for the milestones of life. Awesome. Okay, there's about another 20 seconds. I'm going to let some of the rest of you wrap yours up. Plain language, extraordinary words. Ritual products for a moment of pause. Awesome. Awesome. These are really good. Okay, we're going to move on, not because I don't think you could use more time, but because we don't have more time. Then we have archetypes. An archetype is a literary device in which character is created based on a set of qualities or traits that are specific and identifiable to readers. So they're based on Swiss psychologist Carl Jung's theory that humans have a basic tendency to use symbolism to understand concepts. He identified 12 archetypes, each of them a really powerful identity. Each archetype has its own set of characteristics, values, attitudes, and behaviors. We all have basic human desires, and we aren't taught what to need or want, we just do. 95% of our purchasing decisions are made in the subconscious mind. It's really hard to affect people if we're not hitting them emotionally. And this means that brands with a strong archetypal personality that connect on an emotional level with their audience will have a massive advantage over the competition. Now, we've created brand archetypes, but long before us marketing folks got our hands on archetypes, storytellers, filmmakers, writers have been writing to create some of the world's most loved stories with these archetypal characters, like Maximus as the hero and gladiator, Indiana Jones as the most obvious explorer, and Yoda as the sage. Archetypes are instinctive, they're primitive, they tap into something all of us feel. Each archetype is connected to basic human desires. The thing is, we're all different. We crave different emotions and different ways of feeling. So I like excitement and adrenaline, but for some people that's not so comfortable. Some emotions mean more to certain people than others, which is why certain brands or archetypes resonate more with some of us. They're the personification of these behaviors, and they provide a roadmap that enable you to more accurately appeal to a given desire with a specific personality or persona. So it comes down to connection and differentiation. Because the understanding of these archetypes is so instinctive, we're able to connect with or avoid others really quickly when we experience them, especially in brands. So that might mean we're drawn to or appalled by a brand when we experience them, because they fit into one of these categories. Though we'll know that on an emotional level, but not necessarily a cognitive level. You won't think this brand's a jester and I'm not really that into that. It's just instinctive. So we're going to go through these quickly and in a little more detail. First, this is the primary emotion each of these evokes. So the innocent brings about the feeling of safety, the ruler, control, the regular guy or gal, belonging, the magician evokes power, the hero, mastery, the lover, intimacy, the outlaw, liberation, the caregiver, service, the explorer, freedom, the jester, enjoyment, the creator, innovation, and the sage, understanding. So we're going to go through, how many of you, put in the chat if you've heard of or identified your brand archetype before. Some people are really into them and some people have never heard of them before. So we're going to go through each one of these in a little more detail, but we're going to do it quickly. As we're going through them, jot down the ones that resonate with you, that you think your brand might be. And then at the end, we're going to try to identify which ones they are. Awesome. So the innocent. The innocent brand's archetype goal is to be happy. They strive to be good, they're optimistic, moral, romantic, loyal. A drawback of them is that they could be considered naive or boring. So some brand examples of the innocent are Orville Redenbacher, Dove, and Coca-Cola. The regular guy or gal, their goal is to belong, it's to connect with others. So they're down to earth, they're supportive, folksy, like the person next door, and they connect with people. Their drawback is that they can lack distinctive identity, be too much of a wallflower, a little bit boring. Brand examples of the regular guy or gal are Folgers, Gap, and Levi's. The hero, they help to improve the world, or that's how they see it. They're courageous, they're honorable, strong, bold, inspirational. They can be seen as arrogant or aloof, which is a problem. Some brand examples of the hero are Nike, BMW, and Duracell. The outlaw, their goal is to break the rules and fight authority. They're rebellious, they pave the way for change, and they're wild. They could definitely take it too far and be seen in a negative way as someone who's breaking the rules for no reason. Some brand examples of the outlaw are Virgin Airlines, Harley Davidson, and Red Bull. The explorer, their goal is to find fulfillment through discovery and new experiences. So they're restless, adventurous, ambitious. They're really independent and pioneering. A drawback is that they might not always fit into the mainstream. They might be too outside our comfort zone. Brand examples of this are the Indiana Jones franchise and Subaru. The creator, their goal is to create something with meaning and enduring value. They're creative, imaginative, inventive, entrepreneurial, nonconformist. The drawback is that they can be seen as perfectionists or impractical. And you see Apple's one of these brand examples, and I think of this as personified by Steve Jobs. So if you read his book, he definitely has some of these drawbacks along with the positive traits. Other brand examples of the creator are Lego and Crayola. The ruler, they want to create order from chaos. So they're leaders, they're organized, they're responsible, they're very administrator-y. They can lack a common connection or be considered too authoritative, too like mom and dad for the average person. Brand examples of the ruler are Microsoft and Mercedes-Benz. The magician, their goal is to make dreams come true, create something special. They're visionary, they're imaginative, idealistic, spiritual. A drawback is that they can take risks that lead to bad outcomes. Because they're so idealistic, they think things are going to work out all the time, might not consider the negative. So brand examples of the magician are Disney and Ted. The lover, their goal is to create intimacy and inspire love. They're passionate and intimate, romantic, committed, idealistic. It's a lot harder to find a brand example of these guys. Their drawback is they could be too selfless or not grounded enough. If I think of these brand archetypes, it always helps me to personify them. And you think, do you have that friend who every time he or she gets in a relationship, they're totally lost in it? I think of that maybe being their drawback. Brand examples of the lover are Victoria's Secret and Godiva. The caregiver. Their goal is to care for and protect others. They're caring, nurturing, selfless, compassionate. And their drawback is that they can be taken advantage of or taken for granted or exploited. Again, if I think of this as a person, thinking of someone martyr-y, someone who's always doing the right thing, but maybe not laying out boundaries. So brand examples of the caregiver are Campbell's and Johnson & Johnson. The jester, all they want is to bring joy to the world. So they're fun, they have a great sense of humor, they're lighthearted, mischievous, irreverent. A drawback is that they can be seen as frivolous or disrespectful. But when it strikes, I don't remember the stat, obviously, because there was no story to it, but it's a majority of people prefer stories that are funny from a brand. So this will, when you take a risk, it can work out, but it can also be difficult to execute. Brand examples of the jester are Nykea and Old Spice. And the sage. The goal is to help the world gain wisdom and insight. They're knowledgeable, they're a trusted source of information, they're thoughtful and analytical, they might be considered a guru or an advisor. The drawback is that they can be overly contemplative, too opinionated, feel pretentious in some ways. So brand examples of the SAGE are NPR, Harvard, and Google. So take a minute and just think of what archetype is your brand. Did one resonate with you as we went through it? This recognition might even just be pre-programmed. So one that you're drawn to more, especially if it is your business. If it's not your business and you've taken on a role there, it might be a little harder to identify this. Sometimes I like to think of the founder and look at them. Often the founder of the business, if they're still around, their personality really bleeds into this. So take a minute to decide which archetype your brand is most closely associated with. You're probably going to see traits of 2 or 3, but I want to challenge you to pick just one and put it in the chat. Awesome. And I've got a couple questions here. Do you think that our label signage is effective? Okay, I'm going to answer these ones privately, Maureen. But I think that's locally grown, vine ripened, non-GMO, and pesticide free. I think that probably hits at your USP. It's really hard for me to say without knowing the company in depth and chatting with you in person, but I think you're definitely on the right track. Yes, Corliss says, I feel like my company is a mix of many of these. Is that a common problem? 100%. Doing this exercise with companies, there will be heated debate. So, and it's important to pick one just so you can narrow it on your messaging, but it's okay to have other ones bleed into that. I would try to change it to one if you can. I know that's hard, but if you can, pick the primary one. I sometimes will, I'm also indecisive, so I'll sometimes have a second one as like the minor character. And same question from Carissa, does a brand have to fit into a single archetype? No, you don't. You will fit into multiple, but I still think it's important to choose one main one. I think that will help you narrow your focus in your messaging, but definitely you'll bleed into other categories. That's a great question. That seems like everyone has. Absolutely. And someone says, is it possible to assess my company with you and the message that's being sent? For sure. I'll have a contact slide at the end. This is what I do for a living, so I love this stuff, and you can definitely reach out to me, and we can do a brand audit and talk about some of these things and see if there's something that I can help you with too. Awesome. So we've got hero, sage, magician, creator, outlaw, caregiver. This is great. I'm seeing a lot of variety. Regular guy, magician, sage. Awesome. Hero. I love these. Kate, thank you all for including these. I often find sometimes when I do these, it's like there's only like 30 creators or something. So this is awesome. Okay, and one more question. What if you know you're being hired for being closer to one archetype, like the sage, but end up providing needed service through being more than one different archetype, like a caregiver? That's definitely bound to happen. And your business, I think the reason it's important to choose one is so that you maintain focus, because your messaging will change, but hopefully your voice doesn't too much, though there is always a time for a company to rebrand. And this tends to get more fractured the more services we add, because we start with one thing, then we add something else, then we add something else, and we're just getting a little bit broader and broader. So it's easy to see how that can happen. That's a great question, Kayla. I think eventually you'll choose one, but you'll definitely have categories of both. And caregiver and sage can be closely aligned. So I don't think that's unusual. I think try to choose one, and then and then you can always change as well and shift. But that's a great question. Okay, let's stop my timer here. I didn't even start it. All right, so the next piece with each story is unique, but almost every one of them falls into the traditional story arc that as humans, we just intuitively understand. We create it, we emote it. I don't know if any of you are Brene Brown fans, but she talks about if you hear someone go like, in a meeting, immediately you might be thinking, oh man, what did I do wrong? It must have been when I saw Bob earlier this morning and I didn't offer him a coffee. We're creating these stories all the time because we think in story. So most stories start with a setup, some escalating action leads to conflict, a resolution, and then a conclusion. When you recognize the formula, then it's easier to create stories, and you can look at your content and say, does that have any conflict? Did I tell people about a challenge it solved? When I see brand content, I think that's the piece that's often missing the most, is the conflict, is having some tension. So a strong story plot has a narrative arc that has 4 elements of its own. So the setup, the world where the protagonist exists prior to the journey. So ideally, this is your customer with a problem before they knew about you. The setup usually ends with the conflict being revealed. And then there's rising tension, a series of obstacles the protagonist must overcome. Each one is usually more difficult and higher stakes than the previous one. In classic story arc, at one point, often the climax, there's a no return point. So the character can't just go back and have things be the same. It might be, if in a love story, saying I love you. That's the end. They can't go back and be not in love with that person, or they can't not break up with them, or whatever that action is. And then there's the resolution, the conflict's conclusion. So that's where the protagonist finally overcomes the conflict and learns to accept it, or is defeated by it, as is the case in many stories. Obviously, you don't want it to be the case for your customers, though. You want to help them along. You want to create success for them. So what we need to do is apply all that we know about stories to our brands. How can we tell stories more effectively? Understanding story is the key. And now, hopefully this will give you some ideas, and you'll think about this as you're creating content, as you're writing your website, as you're writing social posts to your customers. We want to always keep story in mind. So at Rock and Bloom, we often start with key messaging. This is something that you, your coworkers, your customers should know about you. The story should become redundant. Ideally, people would be like, yeah, I know. That would be your ideal response, that people have heard it so much they know your story. You want to be able to describe your business, ideally in under 40 words. That's sort of like the logline exercise we did, of getting the point of an entire script or a film across in just one sentence. So simplify and talk to your team and customers. The best case scenario is when you say this, your employees say the same thing, and you know you're at the next level when that's what your customers say. If your customers can recite your USP, you're definitely winning. Warby Parker does a good job saying, laying out their story on their website. They actually do it in one sentence. Warby Parker was founded with a rebellious and lofty objective: to offer designer eyewear at a revolutionary price while leading the way for socially conscious business. So it's not perfect, but it does lay out the problem and the solution, and then the sentences below give us more context. So a few tips for telling good stories. Be authentic. Keep it real. Customers say they want the best product and they want the best price, and that's true. But what they really want is authenticity. They want to know that they're hearing from the person behind the brand. No one wants to be communicating with a corporation. Patagonia is known for their authenticity. This is an ad they ran on Black Friday a few years ago. Headline reads, "Don't buy this jacket." And while all their brands were pushing sales and trying to get consumers in the door early, Patagonia said the opposite: do not buy this jacket. The ad copy details the toll the construction and distribution of this jacket has on the environment, asking customers to think about the environmental impact of consumerism. And instead of spending Black Friday shopping, they told consumers to go outside. And they did that because that's what they really care about: the environment, sustainability, being outside. Their brand values were very obvious. This ad resonated because it felt authentic, and so they saw sales rise by 30% the following year. Similar story with Dove with this ad. Well, most other beauty companies are saying you need us to be beautiful. Dove is telling women that that's not true. You're beautiful as you are. It feels like they share our values, my values as a consumer, that the beauty industry is alienating, weird, preying on, and perpetuating our poor self-image. Like, I've actually taken to flipping magazines around at grocery stores and other places when they have some negative body image stuff. And I think maybe one fewer girl or boy will get bombarded with this one less time. So Dove is doing the opposite. They're promoting authenticity through authenticity. So with both of these brands, their USP is obvious too. So Patagonia, sustainable, environmentally responsible company, and Dove, the home of real beauty. A local brand known for their authenticity is Pineview Farms. So this company is founded by two local entrepreneurs who are passionate about quality meats. Those natural meats are grown and butchered here in Saskatchewan, and their authenticity is palpable. One piece of evidence is that they sold out all their Thanksgiving turkeys earlier this week. This is a brand that Rock and Bloom website, we did their website and some marketing for them, and I love the way it turned out. They were fun to work with as well. On the opposite side of authentic is inauthentic. And when a brand comes across as inauthentic, it's usually pretty obvious. How many of you saw the Kendall Jenner Pepsi ad a few years ago? So I think the best descriptor is tone deaf. The ad depicts Kendall Jenner quelling tensions between police protesters with a can of Pepsi. This one came up again in my thought because the Black Lives Matter protests are resurging again. And it was so universally hated that the brand pulled and apologized for it after just one day, which is sort of fun to see as well. It felt like Pepsi was trivializing protests that so many people were passionate about and even worth losing their lives to. So consumers definitely demand more emotional resonance, progressivism, and authenticity. And they're also smarter than ever and can detect inauthenticity. So they know Kendall Jenner is not going to solve this issue. And that felt really icky when you watched it. Another tip is be creative. A few days ago, someone posted this picture on Twitter. The clothing tag reads, "Vote the assholes out." And we can clearly see Patagonia's branding. They weren't promoting this themselves. In fact, some of the higher ups claim to have not known about this. And I had to do some digging to find out if it was real. And it definitely is. The assholes, as you could probably guess, are politicians of any party who deny the reality of climate change and the science behind it and refuse to take action to fight an increasingly pressing crisis. So when they sent this to design, they didn't know exactly the timeline. It worked out pretty well, being just over a month out from the US election. And this saying is something they've been saying at Patagonia for years. So some of their design team took the liberty of sharing the story. In Quebec, most residential leases come to an end on the very same day. It's chaos. I'm not sure why they do it, but if you're moving in Quebec, you're probably moving on July 1st. Over 100,000 households pack up their belongings and move into new homes on what Quebecers refer to as moving day. The rest of us call it Canada Day. And McDonald's brought to life a creative campaign to remind guests from across the province to treat themselves to McDelivery on an otherwise chaotic day. I love that. They used just objects to represent their food. Lori says, "I love that you flip magazines. I'll think of doing the same." Thank you. I'd love for it to be a movement. Let's all flip magazines. Another tip, speak the language of your customers. So when I was reading Lynchpin by Seth Godin, it was resonating with me, and in more ways than just the story. I didn't know why at first, and then it popped out at me. In this book that's all about the most important person in an organization, the linchpin, Godin was always saying she, her. A woman was in this position. And it's crazy how rare that is. Even in hypothetical situations, the person in power is almost always a man. So this was really refreshing to me because I obviously see the world through a woman's eyes. And often my view has been on the peripheral of a main character. So this was a cool realization. The Washington Post paid tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg through art and story after her passing. They have editorials and journalists on either side of the aisle, but the Post is known to be a liberal publication, and that's why this content works for them. You wouldn't want to do that if your target demographic was Republicans, so know who you're talking to. Be consistent. So providing a consistent customer experience builds trust. Repetition builds trust. If you deliver on a promise over and over again, your customers will trust you. And your promise doesn't have to be perfection. If you're a dental office and you promise no wait times, but then I wait 20 minutes, you've broken your promise to me before I even get the service. So we don't need to have the perfect experience. We just need to guide people through the experience they're actually going to have. Sometimes when you call someone like a 1-800 number or something and you need to get through, it'll tell you the number of minutes, or it'll give you a, hey, we probably won't be able to take your call for an hour. We'll call you back. So they didn't improve the actual experience. They just improved the communication around the experience. And what we know is that purchasing is more an emotional decision than a practical one. People can't usually tell you exactly why they buy the things they buy or why they like the brands they like. If you ask people, sure, they'll give a reason, but that's usually a justification rather than actual insight into how we're feeling at the moment of purchase. When we purchase, we're feeling something, some sort of emotional connection to the brand. So speak to customers the way they want to be spoken to so that they have the opportunity to really relate to your brand emotionally. We also don't know when a customer has their first impression. Your first interaction with them might be when they come into your office, but they may have had many, many, many other interactions before that. Back to the customer journey map. Maybe they saw it, were on your website, saw ads, were on your social media, had a phone call, etc. That's why every interaction should count. It should be positive and it should be on brand. Every experience should be brand recognizable. The way that you know this cup is from Starbucks, this arch is from McDonald's, this screen is an iPhone, this thumb is Facebook's like button, and this curve is Nike's check mark. There's something in marketing that I call a shatterproof test. If there was a piece of your product or a snippet of your service out of context, would people know that it was your brand? That's our goal in creating a really strong brand that resonates with people emotionally. Every interaction should be distinctly you. Wes Anderson is a director, and whenever he does a movie, he chooses a color palette and every scene fits within that. It's beautiful, and not something a lot of people are capable of. Think of the director or the director of photography and cinematography that goes along with this. It's complicated, but he makes it work, and now he's known for that. Cinnabon places ovens near the front of their stores so the smell of warm cinnamon rolls escapes when the door opens. How many of you know the smell of Cinnabon? Of course. The bakeries are intentionally located in malls. A lot of the franchisees won't give an okay for a store to be outside of a place like that because they want the smell to linger. The smell is such a part of their scent. Even putting ovens in the back of the stores at a test location, they said significantly lowered sales. Some cinnamon rolls have to be baked at least every 30 minutes to keep that scent going. And some store operators just heat additional sheets of brown sugar or cinnamon or whatever to keep the aroma in the air. And that smell is triggering because it's consistent. Every time I go through a Subway in Toronto, I know which station has it. A brand doesn't have a single story. They have many, many, many stories. And you need to tell lots of hyper-specific stories to stay relevant. The more you can speak directly to your audience, the more your story will resonate. Yeah, now I'm hungry. Me too. I know, I shouldn't have included that. So telling your story, you should try to include a hook, a problem, a resolution, and the brand equivalent of a conclusion is a CTA, call to action. So at the end of every web page or middle of it, there should always be a button, and that's called a CTA. That should be on everything. Everything you do, you're asking your customers to do something. So make sure it's clear. So hook, why should they care? Why should they care? Why should they care? If you're scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and that's what your customers are doing when you're trying to find them, grab them right away, because it's hard to keep someone's attention. Then explain the problem you're solving and the resolution. How do you solve that problem? And then, like we're talking about the CTA, there should always be a call to action. So that might be more implicit if it's just a story on your Instagram post, or on a blog or a website, it should be really explicit, an actual button. So, oh, I should have animated that brand storytelling to come in after. But anyway, the fundamentals of storytelling: setting, characters, plot, conflict, theme, and story arc. And the brand storytelling equivalents: market, customer personas in your brand, marketing strategy and customer journey, the problems you solve, the USP and brand archetype, and telling your story. So finally, what's the difference between minus 37 and minus 38 degrees? Not a whole lot, right? Both of them are freezing. What about 27 and 28? You probably wouldn't notice a difference. What about 3 and 2? There actually is a difference at 3 and 2. When precipitation falls at 3 degrees, it's rain. When it falls at 2 degrees, it's snow. And so why that's important is that sometimes making a small change can make a huge difference. Don't be disappointed if you don't see results right away. Be consistent and keep it up, because eventually you'll make a small change that has a huge impact. It can feel like you're doing things and you're getting no return, and then you return to your old ways of doing things because you weren't getting sort of a somewhat instant gratification, but just keep chipping away with it. Good marketing takes time. And that's it. So you can differentiate your brand, you can relate to your audience, and you can understand your why. Tell stories that really matter. That's all I have. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. And thank you all so much for joining me. These are some of the resources I used here. I'll put it back on the contact me slide, but you can also, I'll send out these slides if anyone's interested as well. Awesome. Okay, now I'm just reading some of the chats. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Awesome. Oh, I've got a question here. What's an example of an implicit CTA? Good question. Okay, I wish I had written some down, but you might not have a click or a link at the end of every social media post, and that's totally fine, because the people know what you're supposed to do with a social media profile. You want them to visit something, so you don't necessarily at the end of every social post need to say visit the website, but if you're talking about a service, they'll know that's what's coming. I sort of that's not necessarily something that's in the industry. This is how I see it, though. Good question, Tamara. Awesome. Thank you all so much for the great feedback. That makes me feel better. And I'd love to hear critical feedback as well, privately. But you can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook, or connect with me through Rock and Bloom. And really, we do love talking brand at the office. So if you want to come by for a coffee, we'd love to chat. Awesome. I love doing the examples. They're the fun part for me when I can, and that's how I understand. It helps me solidify that. So I'm glad that you enjoyed them, Carla. You guys were such a good group as well. Although I'm trying not to say guys, especially when it's predominantly a group of women, but you women were so good at sharing and incorporating things into the chat. I really appreciate that. The participation was awesome. Awesome. Megan, take some inspiration. If you can steal some slides, take them. Yeah, we're all Saskies, exactly. Awesome. Good. I'm really glad if it could help you, Tanit. I'm not sure if Josie or Jill, if you have anything else that you need to share or do. Yes, and Shauna said I missed the first bit. Can we get a copy of the slides? Absolutely. I'll send a copy of my slides to Josie. And what I haven't done yet from my last presentation about brand voice, but I would like to do is send out a copy of the recording as well as the slides and a worksheet to the people who participated. So maybe we'll try to do the same with this one, though the timeline's never as quick as I'd like to be. But yes, Shauna, you can get the slides for sure. And there's, I think Josie said, a recording going out tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks, Nykea. So yeah, for those who are asking, this is recorded. And we do send out automatic emails about 24 hours after the presentation. So that email will include the link to the presentation, and I will throw the slides in there as well. You'll also receive a little survey at the end of today's webinar, so please fill that out too. If you had a good time, let me know and let Nykea know as well. Otherwise, thanks, Nykea, for the awesome presentation. We do have some events going on tomorrow as well. So for those of you who are in the audience, feel free to check out our events tomorrow on our website, wesk.ca. And with that, I will let everybody go. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.